Welcome to Happened Once Before, a conversation between generational Phish fans. Hi, I'm Bill, and I'll be your host. In each episode, I'll connect with a new Phish fan. We talk about how they got into the band, what they love most, and then spend some time discussing a show from the 1988 to 1996 era of the band. My goal for the podcast is to highlight performances from that time period, 88 to 96. We dive into shows that I felt I listened to frequently, shows that may have flown below the radar, or some seminal moments for the band, and some of these episodes may highlight all three. With Phish celebrating its 40th year as a band in 2023, new fans are finding their way to the catalog every day. Even with pristine quality audio and video readily available, entering into this world is still overwhelming to a new fan. And I felt I knew something about how overwhelming that could be. Entering college in the early 90s, I found myself at the center of a musical transition. I was introduced to the Grateful Dead, like many at the time, through their greatest hits, Skeletons in the Closet. And it served the purpose of whetting my appetite before, but I had no idea where to go next. This would be pre-social media, using landlines to connect to the internet superhighway. And once you were there, you could find that information. You could find a set list and chat rooms, but I still felt lost. And any deadhead I met said that it was all about seeing them live and hearing them live, that the studio albums didn't do justice to the legacy of the band. So I stumbled into their official release, Live Without a Net. And wow, that really helped me get it now and get on the bus and really understand what people had been talking about. Not only them, but it also included, Branford Marsalis. But still being new, I didn't know, who Brent was in the band, and that he had already passed away by the time I was listening to that, and let alone the curse of the piano bench that followed them their whole careers. I was able to peel a layer of the onion, but, the size of it still remained enormous. So when I got to the second part, when I heard the word bootleg, and at that point in my life, it only meant two things to me. One was, alcohol running during Prohibition. And the second being when Rerun was caught bootlegging a concert of the Doobie Brothers on What's Happening. So what I did learn, though, that there were bands like the Grateful Dead who let you record their live concerts without any repercussions. And lucky for me, that was just another way to get in, and another layer revealed itself of the onion. But where do you go? Where do you start when there's 35 plus years of performances to choose from? Where do you go when you don't know anybody who has them? What is a Maxell XL290? My journey began after coming across, a few good bootlegs, a couple of bad ones, and some really awful ones. The sacrifice to listen to 30-year-old music through a hiss of an 8th generation audience copy was something very real. And at that time, the Grateful Dead was a full force business machine in the early 90s. A video on MTV, football stadium tours, and even an Olympic basketball team sponsorship. But meanwhile, at the same time, across the country, isolated in the Green Mountains of Vermont, the four members of Phish were all about the music. The buzz around the band and their stellar high-energy shows grew louder as younger music fans entered into their own self-journeys. Taking pages from the blueprint from the Dead that laid before them, incessant touring, permissible taping, and word of mouth via a devout fan base that would make most major religions jealous, but the Phish gospel was spreading. But this isn't a podcast about the Dead. It's going to be about my favorite band, Phish. And if you've come this far, I don't need to explain who they are, but let me give you an explanation of who I am. I've been a fan for 30 years and was lucky enough, because of geographic location, to see the rise and explosion of the band. I've loved music since I was a very small child. I would listen to the instrumental soundtracks of Star Wars and Chariots of Fire, all classical music, but, was lucky enough to be surrounded by a lot of cool women and who always had music in the house. And, that went to, my grandmother playing Broadway show tunes and Sinatra and the big band stuff, to, hearing the folk and the singer-songwriters of the 70s from the backseat of my mom's car. Her, two cool aunts who got me, understanding who the Talking Heads were, and Blondie and the Stones, and an older sister who introduced me to Led Zeppelin, Metallica, and the Beatles. And then for my own journey at that point, I was lucky enough to have been around in the mid '80s to learn about and be introduced to Public Enemy, Beastie Boys, Eric B. and Rakim, which was part of my musical journey. And as I look back at these varied sounds I would come to love before ever hearing Phish, really set the tone and the foundation for my love of their music. So when the phone rang on that fateful December evening in 1993, I didn't know my life would never be the same after that. You're a good salesperson when a friend can convince you to leave your house during a blizzard to drive 90 minutes on a good day to see a band that you never heard a note from before. But there we were, driving incredibly slow in what can only be described as a textbook New England blizzard, snowy and old, freezing cold that makes people move from New England. Here we were, New Haven Memorial Coliseum, 12/29/93. I remember entering the arena, and the stage was set to look like a giant aquarium with an enormous clam and huge neon kelp. I was obviously unaware at the time that this was not a permanent setup of a band called Phish. But with zero expectations, other than the promise of great music ahead, I was dying to hear what this band would sound like as an empty piano, guitar, bass, and drums sat on the stage. And when they came out to a 3/4 filled arena, who were still getting the cold off of them from outside, and were greeted with energy from the audience that was immediately palpable, it felt like everybody there knew they were in for a treat. And what's great is that same energy is still replicated 30 years later when the band is greeted by their audience. And then I quickly understood why when the opening notes of Runaway Jim filled my ears and hooked me instantly. But even with the benefit of the new internet, with all the concerts available hiss-free, where to start seems daunting. The feeling is what made me do something like this. So this is for the new fan who may feel the same anxiety I felt stumbling into the Dead, or a fan looking for some highlights from a bygone era, or perhaps a relic like me, reliving their youth. But whether you're an old fan or a new fan, it's always comforting to know that it happened once before.
Thoughts from my only breath that I have breathed since I was 10. I hope this happens once.
Thanks for listening. If you're an older fan who'd like to recommend a show from 1988 to 1996, or a new fan who'd like to be part of an upcoming episode, email the show at happenedoncebefore@gmail.com. Again, thanks for listening, and I hope this happens once again.
Thoughts from my only breath that I have breathed since I was 10. I hope this happens once again.